This is a quick introduction into the project for this week. We've talked about loops, we've talked about if statements and various other things. We're going to create a project this week using just regular loops, not nested loops, so you only need one loop. But we're going to have some if statements inside, or switch cases if you prefer. Uh, Now we're going to have basically a little menu here for you to choose from. On this menu, you're going to display apples, pears, oranges, peaches, or exit. This is our fruit loop. Every time this loops, it's going to display this. It's going to ask us to type in one of those numbers. We type in one of those numbers. If it's 1, it will say, you must really like apples. Now, if I do that, it's going to come back and display this again. Type in a number. 2, pears, 3, 4, oranges. Now, I always have a few people who have a tendency to use a for loop for this. You cannot. Well, you can, technically, there are ways, but this is mostly a while loop challenge here. It's going to most definitely need to be a while loop. Now, I'm going to loop until I type in what? 5. So when I type in 5, that's when this loop should end. And there are several ways we've discussed on how to do that. An if statement with break, system.exit. You can just make the loop end when you type in 5. There's a couple of ways to accomplish that, basically. Now, if I choose 1, it'll say you really like apples. 2, pears, oranges, peaches. Now, every time that happens, it's going to keep count of how many times I pick each. So if I choose apples 3 times, it will tell me, at the end of it when I exit, you chose apples this many times, you chose this many pears, this many oranges, this many peaches. So for example, let's say I type in 1, you know, and then I exit immediately. At the end, it'll say goodbye, and then it will just display how many times I picked each of those. So if I chose apples 3 times, pears 1 time, and oranges, 2 times, at the end of this, it should display that number for each of them. Now the count for this cannot be inside the loop. By that I mean the initial start of that variable. It's going to have to be above the loop. Any variable you want to use to keep track of counts. If you declare it inside the loop, it will basically reinitialize and reset to 0 every time. So if I say, loop int apples equals 0, well, every time the loop comes back up, apples is going to be 0 again. Another tendency people have is they will say apples equals 1, pears equals 2, oranges equals 3. If you're going to use those names for the variables, well, I haven't chosen any oranges or peaches yet, so how can I have 4 of them? The count is how many times I chose it. If you set it to 4 at the beginning, then you're already saying you've chosen 4 peaches before you start. All those variables have to be 0 because we haven't chosen anything yet. So don't make them 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 is just what I used for this. If you want to use words instead of numbers, that's fine. But I chose numbers because I find it a little easier. 1, 2, 3, 4 just is the number you choose for that fruit, not what that variable is going to need to be. So fairly straightforward as far as the project itself. It's not a huge project. It probably isn't more than 20 lines of code, uh, give or take probably. You will need input. You will need a loop and of course some if statements or switch case, whichever you like better. Hopefully you've looked through our old projects and this shouldn't be that hard, but if you do have any problems, uh, mail me, message me. Just make sure it's not, midnight the night it's due or 11:30 or something like that. Definitely do not wait to attempt this, especially these later projects in the class, until the last minute. You want to get on these as soon as you can. That way, if you do have a problem, it can be fixed. If you mail me at 11:30 and it's due at midnight, there's no guarantee I will be able to get back to you that quickly. Uh, so don't message me at the last minute. Some people are anyway, but preferably for your own sake, you'll have a more likely chance of finishing it if you do it earlier rather than later. All right, but if you do have questions, leave messages, ask, call, whatever you need.